Welcome to the Dylan Kohlstädt show, and I'm very, very happy to be sitting here with Nic Haralambous. Nic, I've been a huge fan of yours, and I've been following you for years and years and years because you're that old, and you've been an entrepreneur for 1,000 years and sold so many businesses and so successful. So welcome to the show, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I do feel like I'm 1,000 years old sometimes, so you've nailed that one. Thanks.
So just introduce yourself maybe to the audience. Let's say they've been living under a rock and they don't know who you are.
Yeah, fair enough. So I'm kind of in a transitionary phase, so introducing myself is interesting at the moment. So I consider myself to be an obsessive entrepreneur. That's kind of my defining factor. It's what I've done since I was 16, but I'll give you the short version of a long and sordid story. I started coding when I was 11, taught myself how to code, built my first website when I was 12, started my first business at 16 at school.
I
Then
see you were in a rock
studied.
band.
I was at university. That was one of my early businesses. So I studied journalism, politics, and philosophy at Rhodes, but also was building businesses throughout. And one of them was a band that almost got a record deal. We were about to sign. On the day we were all signing the contract, our lead singer told us that he had to quit and was going to get a job at Unilever, which was actually probably a good decision in hindsight. I mean, how many bands in South Africa become profitable businesses? So good on him. And then left Rhodes and worked as a journalist for a while, Sunday Times, Mail and Guardian, Business Day, Financial Mail.
Which explains why you write so well.
Thank you. That is a great compliment. I have been writing since I can remember, since 7 or 8, like prose and poetry, and then stories and articles. And it's kind of how I process my life is, I don't know if you've come across this research, but apparently half of people have an internal narrator in their brain, and they actually talk to themselves with a narrator. So I'll be walking through my day going, oh geez, I have to remember, and I actually say in my brain, oh, I have to remember to wash the dishes. And that's kind of how I process my writing. Is I'll start writing headlines or tweets months before I write them out in my head. My narrator narrates them to me. Anyways, that's a sidetrack. So yeah, band didn't work out. Went and worked as a journalist. Journalist got broke. That didn't work out either. And I realized that my obsession with capitalism and businesses was more interesting than my obsession to be a war correspondent, which is what I wanted to be when I was 7 years old. So then moved to Vodacom, raised a ton of capital for a business, and then moved to Cape Town. That was my first real venture-backed business. I mean, there were lots of businesses in between that, but that was the first VC-backed business that we then exited 2 years later to Mixit. Mixit subsequently shut down about a year after that, which that's a whole other story.
Just made it.
Yeah. That was fun times. And then started a consulting firm, which I sold to Imperial Logistics. And then
I used to work for them. You're kidding me.
Shame, I'm sorry about that. No, I'm kidding. They were great. They just weren't my kind of people. And then started a fashion company in e-commerce and expanded to 5 physical retail stores, and then luckily sold that in 2019 before COVID hit and malls became dead. So here we are. How would I describe myself now? Right now, I'm kind of writing books and helping people build better lives and businesses. So I've got 2 books out. My next one is coming out in February, called The Business Builder's Toolkit. To kind of help business builders, kind of like a chicken soup for the soul, but for business builders. Not chronological, not a story, just lots of help and advice that I've curated.
Very cool.
And I do a lot of keynote speaking and business coaching.
Wow. So you've built the life you want to live.
Yeah, I kind of, it's an interesting thing. I mean, if to dive in, I've been attached to building businesses since I was 16. So my entire identity has been formed around, I have a business, I have staff, I've raised money, and now I'm scaling this thing. And at the end of 2019, I kind of stopped and didn't want that for a while, because building businesses for 20 years and being burned out and having suffered severe physical manifestations of stress, I decided to kind of figure out what it looked like if I wasn't an entrepreneur for a bit.
Wow. So what did that feel like? Because isn't that so deeply ingrained in your fiber that you suffered a bit of existential crisis at the same time?
A little bit of existential crisis is an understatement of severe proportions.
Severe depression and
yeah. There was a lot of depression, a lot of confusion. I spent time with my psychologist unpacking this idea, and I've now kind of come out of it. And the main premise that I think applies to basically everybody who's attached their identity to something is, for business owners, your identity is tied to your work and your output. And that then promotes this idea of hustle culture and proving to people how busy you are, and how when you succeed at work, you feel like a success in life.
Pause, because I read that blog of yours this morning, and I needed to read it because I've been exactly at that point saying I am tired of being so busy and like nearly dying. And
being busy is bullshit.
Yes, and all of I've got it right here, and being busy is killing us, guys. You have to read this blog. It's like life-changing. So now to just do it.
Well, and this isn't even a segue. This was all part of, how do you value yourself? Like, where does your self-worth come from? And if it comes from successful output, then what you want to do is work more to prove to people that you have successfully put out more work than everybody else, so that you can feel successful.
You just go down, down, down. It just, you work. And that's how I feel. I feel like I've never worked harder in my life than I am right now. And I felt this way last year, and I felt that way the year before, which is telling me that it's just getting tighter and tighter. It's compounding. Yes, that's the word.
Yeah. And so fortunately for me, it was hard, but it was necessary to, with my psychologist, understand, how do you value yourself? Where does your self-worth come from? And it can't just come from your work, or for me, being an entrepreneur, because now I don't have a business, and I don't have staff that need me, and I don't have investors that I have to report to. So then how do you value your time? And even to the point where I'm extremely privileged and fortunate that I don't really have to work that hard day to day. I do spurts of hard work, but in a day, like, I can do one keynote and then have nothing else for 5 hours.
Wow.
The guilt and the anxiety that rises up in you when you're sitting and you have nothing to do just freaks you out. So I've had to teach myself that it's okay to do nothing. And the way that I've done this is to find research to support these things. So there is research that indicates that boredom is good for your long-term thinking. It helps you percolate and ingest all of the things you've learned. If you're constantly consuming media, when do you stop and assess the media you've consumed? Well, you do that when you're bored, right? You let those things come to the front of your mind and you process them. So I'm kind of justifying being bored by going, okay, well, I'm thinking. I'm listening to this piece of music because I'm percolating. And so that's kind of how I've dealt with decoupling my self-worth from my output.
Okay, so, all right. Well, since we don't have infinite amounts of time, and by the way, just in case people see movement on my lap, this is what they're seeing. Okay, so because we don't have infinite amounts of time, I would love to just chat to you and just let stream of consciousness go. But we are here to chat about thought leadership and why CEOs should be thought leaders and how and stuff like that. So firstly, like we tend to just default and call it personal branding, but I think South Africans struggle with this idea. I think we have a lot of false humility or real humility, I'm not sure, but South Africans worry about what their friends are going to say about them around the braai and on Facebook, and who do you think you are? You think you're so clever? What is this, posting your wisdoms? So what is your view on CEOs? Should they be thought leaders? Should they be doing what you're doing on LinkedIn and on Twitter, posting these nuggets of wisdom?
I don't think that there is a standard cookie cutter answer for this one. I think that a lot of CEOs don't want to be in the public eye. They don't want to have a personal brand. They want to build stuff and shut up and do, not talk about doing. And that's great. That's cool if that's what you're up for. I think that the lots of things you mentioned there, the fake humility, humbleness, it isn't something I see everywhere. I don't see it in the US. I don't see it in the UK. I don't see it in Europe a lot. It is very much a conservative culture that we've got in South Africa where, I can't have an opinion in case I piss someone off or in case someone disagrees with me. And it's never really how I've lived in the world. My entire existence is counter. I am counterculture, counter social. My partner and I aren't married. I don't want to have kids. I'm a nihilist. I'm a libertarian. I am a capitalist, but I have a nonprofit. Like everything that I do is counter. So I'm kind of okay with pissing people off. And I guarantee you, if you meet 100 people who know me and ask them if they like me, 50% will say they hate me, 50% will say they don't really care. And I'm okay with that. Like, that's fine with me. It's always
Yes.
been the way that I push it out there. And I think that's kind of where you start with a personal brand is, do you care what other people think? And I've written and published videos on this before. The 5 most dangerous words when you're building a personal brand to anybody is, what will other people think? Because here's the truth. Nobody cares. If you're listening to this right now and you think people care about you, you have what's called egocentrism. The world does not revolve around your little existence. There are 7 point however many billion people just like you who think that the world revolves around them just like you. So the truth is, your family and friends don't even think about you on a day-to-day basis. And I'll tell you how I know this to be true. When I don't post on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or LinkedIn, nobody phones me and goes, "Hey, dude, are you okay?" Nobody. Because nobody cares. Nobody thinks
That's
about
so
me.
funny.
Nobody's waiting for me to fail. Nobody's waiting for me to succeed.
That's so
Nobody
true.
exists until
And
I tell them I exist.
that is such a relief. It just brings
Isn't it
me
just?
relief to think
Yeah.
that.
And
And
that's how I
that's
framed this, right? Because
liberating.
that's the point. Yeah, the point is it should be in the nicest way possible. Nobody gives a shit about you. So go do whatever you want. Go say whatever you want.
I
Go
love it.
be anything you want to be because
Oh my
nobody
gosh.
is waiting for you. They just aren't. And if you think they are, you're not that important. I promise you. I'm not that important. Nobody cares. If I stopped my LinkedIn post tomorrow, nobody is going to care. They're just going to find the next LinkedIn person.
Yeah.
So you may as well be the way you want to be and do the things you want to
So
do
true.
because that's the way to gather an audience, is to be the most version of yourself, not to copy the most generic version of what you think will win.
That right there, we can just stop the whole podcast because I think that what you've just said there just
Great, we're done.
absolutely drop the mic. Um, so you've written books. Do you think that writing books is key to being a thought leader, or do you think they're
No,
synonymous?
no, not at all. I think that it's quite a legacy, as Rich Mulholland would say, legacy thinking, that you need to have a book before you can be a thought leader. I think that the world has so many other platforms that people can utilize to become thought leaders today that really the truth is very little defines thought leadership other than followers right now. And it's a sad state of affairs, but that's where we find ourselves. I mean, who in the world would have thought that Kim Kardashian would be a thought leader? But she is, whether you want to believe it or not, she is. I was watching a 16-minute interview with Dwayne Johnson, The Rock, this morning. Vanity Fair asks increasingly more personal questions, and I was riveted. Who would have thought that Dwayne Johnson was a thought leader and an interesting, deep, introspective, intelligent human being who I wanted to listen to his opinions on things?
No.
So I think that what I try and do, I coach a lot of business owners and help them find better lives and better businesses, is I try and help them focus. The thing that we mostly get stuck with is we think that social media is everything all the time about anything, and it's not. It's about focus. It's about niche. And the phrase that I try and help people remember is niche means specific. Niche doesn't mean small. So find your niche and focus on that as your area of authority, and then talk about that consistently. So a book helps you do that. A book is a focused thing. Nobody's going
Yes.
to publish a book about
Yeah.
17,000 different topics. But that's what we do on our social media all the time. So I'm going to talk
Yeah.
about politics and religion and life and this irritating thing that happened to me. Then actually thought leadership is just about focusing and consistently talking about a topic that interests you.
So I wanted to ask you about that because on your LinkedIn it says, I help people build better businesses and better lives. And I wanted to know, I was curious to know how long it took you to distill that essence, because it's not easy. It's not easy to focus and distill, and it may take maybe even a few years to I think this is what I do.
It
How
took
long
me
did it
about a
take
year
you?
to write that tagline.
Wow.
I wrote and rewrote it maybe every week until I was kind of happy with it. But it's an evolution, right? I don't think
Yeah.
it's a single thing that will be there forever. At the moment, what I'm trying to do is help people understand that I've suffered for 20 years as an entrepreneur who burned out, so you don't have to. And that's kind of where my work is distilling towards,
Mm.
is I'm going to help you, one, get your life in order, and two, that will be the result of getting your business in order. So that's where I found myself at the end. And it's kind of a catch-all tagline that helps me look at the individual as well as work with corporates to help the individual.
I love it. I think it's amazing. And so do you think that having an active thought leadership presence has helped you in any way?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the interesting thing for me specifically is I've got 20 years, now 21 or 2 years of building businesses as experience, 3 exits behind me, multiple failures, like 10 business failures, and 2 books that I've now published that allows me to be what people call a thought leader. I would never, ever, ever, ever brand myself a thought leader ever. It's part of that. I don't know if you've come across the Dunning-Kruger effect, but the more you know, the less you feel like you know. And
Yes.
the Dunning-Kruger effect is when you don't know enough, you think you know all of it. And then as soon as you learn stuff, you're like, oh crap, I don't know anything. And I'm okay with that.
Yes.
And that's kind of the journey that I think most authors, publishers, published people are on. Is I thought I knew a lot, so I wrote a book. Then I wrote the book, and I was like, holy crap, I don't know anything about this topic. So let me just keep learning. It's kind of why I don't like to talk about imposter syndrome. I like to call it imposter phenomenon, because I believe that in smart people, it pushes you forward. It doesn't pull you back. It holds you to your own standards and then goes, okay, I don't know enough about this. I feel like an imposter. Let me learn a bit more and level up. And it's a phenomenon that keeps you growing rather than holds you back for a lot of people. And that's kind of where I exist in this world of thought leadership.
Well, yeah, I agree, because often when I stand on stage and I'm training or I'm teaching something, in the beginning, I was crippled by the thought that there's somebody in the audience that knows more than you, and they're sitting there judging you, thinking you know nothing. But then I realized that probably 90% in the audience didn't know what I was saying, and I'm there for them. So there's always going to be somebody who knows what you're saying, and but that's not your market, and you're not there to help those guys. They've got other mentors.
100% right. And for me, a big part of the social media imposter syndrome I've experienced is I worry when the imposter syndrome comes back, is when I think, who is listening to me? Who's reading this post? And then I think, all the smart people I know and I've built in my network over the last 20 years are following me, and they know this shit and they're judging me. But actually, you have to remember that when you're being public about your opinions, you're not doing it for the people who know. You're not doing it for your network. You're doing it for the people who are looking for you to guide them somewhere. And in my coaching, what I try and remind people is, you're not looking for all the customers. You're looking for your customers. You're not looking for the entire world as your audience. You're looking for your audience. And that's a different thing. Then you don't feel like an imposter when you're dealing with just your small audience of people who need the help that you can provide.
I completely agree with you. When you look at Google Analytics, you see like 94% of people bounce from your homepage. That means you're not for 90 to 94, 96% of people. If you're lucky, there's 6, maybe 10% of people that you are for. And of those 10%, maybe only half of that are actually going to buy from you. So actually your audience is quite small. And I love it that the more niched you are, and you call it focus, the more niche you are, the more focused you are, the easier it is for that tribe to find you, for those.
Absolutely. And that's where those two things combine for me. Is niche means specific. So you must be specific about who you're talking to in the message, be polarizing and be specific. And then the second thing that I'm trying to remind people who are trying to build an audience in a community right now is, communities are built by excluding people, not including people.
Yes.
You can't build a community by going, oh, this is a space for everyone. No, it's not. Because who is everyone?
Oh,
how do you talk to everyone?
Never thought about that.
Yes. What you do is you say to people, this is an LGBTQ community. That's it. This is not for everybody. This is for this community. Everybody else is welcome but excluded. And that's how you have to look at building content, is you can't talk to everyone about everything. You have to talk to your niche about your area of expertise.
And I think that's why I love personal branding, because for me it's storytelling, and it's about sharing your unique journey that's going to resonate with your tribe and not with everybody else. And the more you share of your background, the more it brings people in who have had a similar experience. And it's not just about your work experience, even like your successes and failures, as you pointed out before.
Yep, absolutely right. And I think that storytelling point is an interesting one. I spent many years trying to figure out, what did I have to offer to the world as a journalist in the business arena? And the truth is, the older you get, the more you realize that leaders lead by telling good stories and people follow good narratives. They don't follow aggressive, hard people because they're aggressive and tough. They follow them because they buy into their vision, they buy into their mission. They lead because they know how to sell a good story. And look at all the evangelical cult of personalities that we've seen in the last 30 years. Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, even the Uber, Travis Kalanick, Ariana Huffington, Oprah. These are all good storytellers, not good business people, but good storytellers. Then the rest comes. Look at Obama and all these great leaders. They know how to sell you on a story, and then the rest backs it up. But the story comes first as a good leader.
So what if you're not a narrator, you're not an orator? Like I've worked for bosses who were the most eloquent. They never said they train of thought flowed beautifully. They didn't even need notes. They were just amazing. And you'd sit and watch them in awe. But like, what if you're an ummer and an ahher and you just don't have clear thoughts and you're not very confident?
Then you need to do what people like Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates, and Elon Musk have done. Get training. Because Elon Musk is and undoubtedly, if you look at Jeff Bezos's interviews 19 years ago and his interviews today, he is a different human being. Bill Gates, look at him when he started out and look at him today, different human being.
That's so true. If Bill Gates can speak in front of a camera, I think anybody can learn to speak in front of a camera.
Elon Musk is always in the press, but why do you think his preferred method of communication with everyone is Twitter? Because he can type out his thoughts. Like, he's not a good speaker. He stutters, he stammers, he doesn't get he's oh my goodness, what is that phrase? Spits and starts, or fits and starts is how he speaks. He builds himself up and then he gets it all up and then he stops. Like, he's not a good orator. His ability is to sell the vision to people by being completely out there. But all of the people who struggle get help. Being a good speaker is about practice and learning how to be a good speaker.
I completely agree. And like Elon, what's interesting to me is I read an article the other day. When he tweets, his share price increases in most cases. So if you've ever looked for a business case as to why personal branding, thought leadership, being active on social media matters, it's that you actually can't, the more present and active you are, your brand can actually benefit. So hiding away is not doing anybody any favors.
Definitely. But look, there are two schools of thought here. The only alternative I can think of right now is Satoshi Nakamoto, the founder of Bitcoin. He created this mystery, or he, she, or them, they created this mystery around the founder of Bitcoin. They've never spoken publicly. They've never outed themselves. There is no cult of personality. They removed themselves so that it wasn't about them. It was about the technology. So there are businesses where this becomes the thing. I mean, can you tell me who the CEO of General Electric is right now?
I remember Jack, but I don't know who's there now.
Cult of personality, and now not cult of personality. There's something to be said about a business that can decouple and disassociate from its founder, and most of the businesses struggle with this. Microsoft went through a dip. I'm sure that Amazon is going to have some teething pains when Jeff moves off properly, but there is a pro and a con to it, I think.
What about negative feedback? How should people respond to, trolling, however mild?
I think that you shouldn't entertain it. I'm quite brazen about it. If you are using ad hominem attacks to try and undercut my debates, I will just call you out. And if you don't want to respond as a human being, I'll just mute you, delete you, unfollow you. I don't care. Like, why would I give all my attention to one human being who doesn't have the guts to be nice to me and debate me on my points, rather want to tell me that my beard is ugly? Like, that's your stuff. I don't care. So I don't tolerate any of it. I'm very aggressive at the moment on if things aren't additive, they are subtractive. So my engagements online need to be additive to my life, to my mental health, to my psyche, to my ability to do my job. And if they're not, they just go away. Like, life is too short to debate idiots. I'm no interest. If you want to have a reasonable debate with me about points and interesting engagements, fine. But if you're just going to attack me because you don't like what I'm saying, then go away. I don't care.
Agreed. So what? Just delete, ignore, block.
Delete, block, unfollow. There are so many other people you can talk to. Why have a debate? And think about this. When was the last time you saw a debate on Twitter that ended with someone actually changing their mind and going, oh my God, you're right, I see your point of view?
I know.
Well, why do that? Twitter is not a platform for debate. It is a platform for us. It's a soapbox. It's a platform for us to spout our opinions and hope that nobody challenges us.
Yeah, I agree. Like my favorite saying is, if someone's going to push in front of you and steal your parking or push in front of you, they're an unreasonable human being. Reasoning with them is not going to change things
Nope.
because they wouldn't have done this bad, ridiculous thing in the first place. So just walk away. I think that's the best.
And look, I've had to work really hard on that problem and premise. In Stoicism, they call it the dichotomy of control, that you can allocate your attention in two ways: to something that you can control or something that you can't control. And I use the example of traffic. I don't drive anymore in traffic because it makes me so angry. And one of my options is to learn how to deal with traffic and not make it make me angry, or to remove myself. So I chose to allocate my energy to something else. I can't control how other people drive. I can control how I react and what I do to prevent myself from getting in traffic. That's how I work with that. Same with trolls.
I love it. I absolutely love it. So what do you think about CEOs encouraging their staff to build their personal brands within the company? What are your thoughts around that?
I think that the statement that I think is the preface for this is IQ was the leadership style of the last decade, and EQ is going to be the leadership style of the next decade. And good leaders need to have solid EQ, and that means knowing what you're good at and understanding that you can't be good at everything, and that it's okay to let your teams build their own brands, be their own people, as long as it doesn't compete with your business and it's in line with your mantra, your ethos, your mission, your vision. That's cool. But you need to be a relatively low ego, high EQ leader to do that. And I don't know many low ego, high EQ leaders, and they struggle then to let other people have their own personalities out in front, because it might detract from the CEO's ability to shine their light.
Yeah, I've also had the opposite, where the CEO doesn't want to stand in the spotlight, and he's like, no, elevate my staff and my teams, which I think is also a nice thing. I think that the concern is always they're going to leave and take the followers with them. But I think if you're a CEO, you realize that you have people for a brief period, you grow them, and when they've outgrown your business, they must leave. It's like you're just nurturing people like plants, which I see both you and I like our plants.
Yeah.
You just nurture them. When they outgrow the pot, they got to move the pot. And if you can't make a bigger pot, then they've got to leave, So I like that saying.
Yeah, it is difficult in 2021. We've kind of still adopted the old ideal that staff should be loyal and that they should stick around because they should be grateful to have a job. And in high impact environments, that's not true. Jobs are competitive, and talent leaves. I've never stayed in a job longer than 5 to 7 years. My longest business was 7 years. And as an employed person, I never stayed in a job for longer than 18 months. Like, that's the world we live in now. So what are leaders doing to retain talent? That's on them.
I completely agree. Okay, so are there any closing comments that you wanted to on the topic, nuggets you wanted to drop, or thoughts you had?
No, look, I think on a high level, we live in a world where the cult of personality is the thing that becomes popular and famous, but it isn't for everybody. Not everybody wants to be in the limelight. Not every business needs a personality to be at the forefront of lead generation or sales or revenue. I think the main thing that people need to figure out is, how do you define success for yourself? How do you position yourself in that world? And how does that vision of success play out into your life? Like, if you don't want to have people know your name and your face and contact you because they love you or hate you, then don't build your personal brand. That's fine. Figure out other ways to do it. It's not for everybody. There isn't a single brush. And the world of social media has tricked us all into thinking that we must have a brand. You don't have to have a brand. The social media is only 15 years old. Get over it. Like, just because that's how it is going to be doesn't mean how it should be for you. There's lots of ways to do these things. And I know lots of successful entrepreneurs who you would not know their name. I mean, I know people who are worth hundreds of millions of dollars who just live an anonymous life. And that, I would argue, is better than having a personal brand with 10 million followers and not letting you walk out of your house.
Yeah, at the end of the day, you hop on that treadmill and you have to post, and otherwise, your followers start to dip, and that's just another treadmill. To your point, let's get off these treadmills. So, in closing, who are your mentors, or who are you drawing inspiration from at this point in time?
I've said in the past that I've never really had a formal mentor relationship. I've been lucky to have created and curated friends that I want to be like. And I think I'm cheating a little bit when I say that these people aren't my mentors, but I have been fortunate to get to know one of the founders of Starbucks over the last 5 years. And he's not, I wouldn't call him a mentor. He's more of a friend who advises me occasionally on things I'm struggling with. But some of my closest friends are the most ambitious and successful people I know. And they inspire and motivate me to be a better version of myself.
Yes.
You know that saying, you are the sum total of the 5 people you spend the most time with?
Yes.
I like to flip that on its head and say, you are the worst parts of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So be careful who you spend the most time with. And the example I have is, if you spend time with your racist uncle, you're going to be a little bit racist over time. You're endorsing that kind of behavior. So who are you spending the time with, and what are their worst traits? And for example, one of my best friends, one of his worst traits is that he's a stubborn asshole. And I'm okay with that. Like, if his worst trait is that he's stubborn and that gets him to be the ambitious success that he is, I'm okay with that. It's like, I'll take his bad parts for his good parts. So if you can't find a mentor, which I've never been able to, then surround yourself with people you want to be like and let them inspire you.
I love that. I think for a long time, I think it comes to, it's, your friends are a reflection of your inner you, in the sense that if you have really low self-image, and you just look at your circle of friends, and they'll just tell you what you need to know about yourself. Because if you're friends with successful, or at least success, I mean, by whose definition, but confident, balanced, yes, healthy people, I think that's a reflection of your inner self. And if you're friends with toxic people, again, take a look at yourself. I love that. So what's next for you? What are you busy working on? What are your next ambitions and projects, if we may ask?
Yeah, the next thing, so my next book comes out in February. It's called The Business Builder's Toolkit. It's going to be in partnership with the Daily Maverick, which is pretty cool.
Awesome.
It's their first business book that they're publishing, which is great. So that's coming. And to be honest, what I'm trying to do over the next 6 months is focus a bit more. I feel like I'm doing too many things at 90% instead of anything at 100%. So over the next 6 months, I'm going to be cutting things down, not adding things to my repertoire. And that's really it. It's like, I'm kind of trying to work I hate the word, but in a balanced way, in a way that makes me sleep properly, exercise, eat healthily, engage in fun things, as well as do the kind of work that I want to do. And that's really it. I'm not building $1 billion business. I'm not building a startup. I'm trying to just settle into existing in the world as someone without a business for a while.
Interesting. One closing word of wisdom, please, if for my benefit more than anybody else's. How do you say no? How do you say no to the busyness, and how do you cull the unnecessary noise?
It's a difficult one. And I mean that in a literal sense. It is difficult. It's not something that I think is a single answer. It's something I work at all the time. But I can say that I have looked back on my 20-year career as an entrepreneur, and the single defining thing that I can peg to my success and failure is my inability to say no, my inability to ignore opportunity in the face of something I'm already doing. So the way that I have started to say no to things is to say emphatically yes to things that I think I can do for 10 years. So if you've made that, so for example, I believe I can write books for 10 years or 20 years. I really love it. It's a passion for me. It helps me build a business and a life and helps people. So I'm going to do that regardless of what else I do. So then if I'm doing this, it means that I'm saying no to a plethora of other things. So what you've said yes to actually means saying no to infinity of things. You have to decide what yes you're saying and why you're saying that, and can you do it for 5 or 10 years? And that 5 or 10 years bracket is something that I've only recently come to understand, is it takes between 5 and 10 years to build anything of value. If you are building a business and you're starting today, don't think you're going to do it for 1 or 2 years. Like, that's a dream. If you are going to do something for real, build a career as an author or a football player or an entrepreneur, you have to look to do it for 10 years. And can you do the thing you're doing for 10 years? Would you want to? Sure, things might change, but can you look forward and see it being something you do in 10 years? And if you can't, maybe you should say no to this thing and yes to something else.
I love it. Thank you so much, Nic. You've been an absolute font of wisdom and inspiration. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. No, thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.